What if everything you've ever believed about success is a lie? You've chased goals, built routines, worked harder than ever, yet something still feels empty, doesn't it? Here's the truth. Success isn't about doing more, it's about thinking differently. In her book, The Success Mindset, Paola Knecht reveals a truth most people never dare to face. That success begins the moment you stop living someone else's definition of it. So before you check your next to-do list, stop for a second, because this episode might just rewrite the entire story of how you measure success. Hello, everyone. Hi, all.
And welcome to BookPodCastZone. It really is a genuine pleasure to be digging into this particular book today. I'm the host speaker, Emma.
And I'm John.
On that central question, why doesn't making it feel the way we expect? That's really the heart of Paola Knecht's fantastic work, The Success Mindset. It's more than just another self-help book. It feels more like a blueprint, really, for building success from the inside out.
Yeah, exactly. Our source, the book itself, it really frames this whole thing as a kind of necessary evolution, moving away from that exhausting chase for external validation, the job titles, the bigger paycheck,
Right.
and moving towards this quieter, more solid sense of inner command. She calls it a personal revolution.
And that's really our mission for you listening today. We want to provide a deep dive, kind of a shortcut, extracting those fundamental shifts you need to make to get you off that hamster wheel of chasing external goals and into what Knecht calls inner command. We really need to get into the mechanics of how that works.
Definitely. So we're going to explore how each of her 11 chapters sort of builds on the one before it, creating this, what feels like a really solid structure for lasting, authentic fulfillment. We're not just giving you the bullet points. We're really looking for those specific aha moments, the ones that, might actually change how you operate.
Couldn't agree more. Let's jump right in. We'll start with section 1, redefining success and finding that alignment, that crucial alignment that stops us from falling into that arrival fallacy trap.
Okay, chapter 1. It hits you right away. It's called Redefining Success, the wake-up call.
Mm-hmm.
And Knecht, she immediately tackles this huge cultural idea of the made it moment.
Mm-hmm.
We're all sort of programmed to think that promotion or hitting that salary number or maybe the perfect relationship status, that will bring lasting happiness.
Right, the finish line.
Exactly. And she asks this really uncomfortable question. Why do these big career peaks, these major milestones, why do they so often feel, hollow once you actually get there?
That's the arrival fallacy right there, pure and simple. And she argues that hollowness comes because we're mistaking external validation, what other people think, for genuine internal fulfillment. But what's key here, I think, is she's not saying don't achieve things.
No, not at all.
It's about the metric we use. The core shift she's demanding is huge. Success isn't about how many trophies you have on the shelf, metaphorically speaking. It's about reclaiming joy and self-acceptance in who you are, not just based on what you manage to accumulate.
That difference, joy in being versus joy in having, that feels absolutely critical. And she links this directly to what she calls the emotional pivot, that quiet crisis that often hits high achievers, often in their 30s or 40s.
Oh, yeah.
You've followed the script, perfectly good school, climb the career ladder, get the status, but then there's this gut-wrenching feeling of emptiness. You did everything right according to the rules, but you feel wrong.
And psychologically, that makes sense, right? Chasing external goals gives you these big dopamine hits during the chase, but the reward just vanishes almost the second you grab it. Knecht really pushes you, the reader, to see that this emotional emptiness is a direct symptom of living someone else's life, a second-hand life. And that's why she makes this audit your life inventory non-negotiable. It's about listing things you do just for approval versus things that genuinely spark that, internal fire.
You can really see this playing out right now, can't you? Millions of people, especially after the last few years, seem to be doing this kind of audit, maybe without even realizing it.
Oh, absolutely. The current U.S. landscape is full of examples. We've seen this ongoing trend of quiet quitting, sure, where people dial back effort to the minimum. But maybe even more significantly, you see this exodus of really high-achieving professionals from major centers like Silicon Valley or Wall Street.
Right. People walking away from huge salaries.
Huge salaries, 6, even 7 figures, high-status titles. And they're choosing to pursue things that are way less profitable financially, but are deeply meaningful to them. Maybe it's teaching. Maybe it's starting a craft business. Maybe it's just consulting remotely so they have more life flexibility.
Trading that constant performance anxiety for something sustainable.
Precisely. That exact shift leaving behind the external pressure of I must have the corner office for the internal clarity of I must do work that actually feeds my soul. That's Necht's Chapter 1 thesis playing out in the real world. It proves that sustainable drive comes from purpose, from that internal alignment, not just the temporary high of getting another gold star.
So the big takeaway from this wake-up call chapter is, well, it's simple but kind of revolutionary, isn't it? Before you measure success in dollars or job titles, you have to measure it in joy, in authenticity. You have to stop chasing someone else's finish line.
It's the absolutely essential first step. You have to stop the momentum if you're heading in the wrong direction.
If you found it interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates.
Okay, so once we've done that potentially brutal life audit from Chapter 1, Knecht guides us into Chapter 2. Discovering your vision, igniting the inner compass. Here, she helps us shift from just identifying what we don't want to actually defining what truly lights us up, getting us out of that daily fog, that feeling of just grinding away.
Yeah, this is all about finding a clear direction, isn't it? Moving beyond just having these vague wishes or dreams. Knecht really stresses that vision can't be passive. The big change here is how she defines vision. It's not some far-off, fuzzy goal. It's the daily why. The thing that creates this magnetic pull drawing you forward into action. It turns those hazy dreams into like an active compass for your everyday decisions.
That idea of a magnetic pull suggests there's a strong emotional component here, too. Oh, definitely. It's that thrill of the aha moment, that sudden, almost overwhelming clarity about your purpose. It often feels like, finding a lost piece of yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a childhood passion for something, writing, building things that got buried under years of adult responsibilities, paying the mortgage, answering emails, hitting deadlines. Rediscovering that feels like coming home to yourself.
But okay, if we're talking about these big visions, figuring out the how can feel completely paralyzing, right? How do I actually do that? Knecht offers a key action here that feels, well, almost backwards.
It is counterintuitive, isn't it? She actually advises mapping out your deepest desires without getting bogged down in the how, the logistics, the step-by-step plan. We tend to get stuck planning the intricate details of the road trip before we've even decided where we want to go. Knecht argues that the how is almost irrelevant, maybe even a distraction, until the why, that inner vision, is crystal clear. Once your purpose is locked in, she suggests, the universe, or your own energy, or even just serendipity, tends to align to help clear the path. Clarity of purpose has to come before clarity of method. Always.
This feels incredibly relevant when you think about how unstable careers can feel these days, especially here in the U.S.
It's extremely timely. Let's connect this to the bigger picture for a second. Look at what's happening with AI and automation and what's predicted for, say, 2025. A lot of jobs, even skilled white-collar roles, are becoming much more volatile. So when the external world, your industry, your specific job, feels fundamentally shaky, aligning your work with what she calls a soul-deep purpose, that inner compass, becomes your only real defense against burnout and that external instability. If your why is internal and solid, then economic shifts or industry changes don't shatter your foundation. They just mean you need to adapt how you execute your purpose.
So Chapter 2 is really about swapping out that shaky foundation of what should I do to impress others or meet expectations for the solid ground of what genuinely moves me. Find that internal motivation that ideally doesn't need an alarm clock to get you going.
It's about finding your own gravitational center. Everything else orbits around that.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Okay, moving into Section 2. Here, Knecht really focuses on building that crucial inner foundation. We start with Chapter 3, Untapping Intuition, the Whisper That Roars. She talks about how modern life, with all its constant noise and data overload, has basically drowned out our own instincts.
It's true, isn't it? We're kind of conditioned to outsource our decisions, whether it's letting an algorithm tell us what movie to watch or following the latest productivity guru's exact morning routine. Knecht wants us to reclaim those little hunches, those gut feelings we usually brush off as irrational, and turn them into trusted guides.
So the core shift is?
The core shift is seeing your intuition as your own personal, unfiltered GPS system. An internal navigation tool. Ignoring it pretty much guarantees you'll get lost in the static of external advice, endless social media feeds, and everyone else's opinions. That gut feeling. Often it's your purest piece of data before your rational mind starts messing with it.
Wow. The emotional pivot there. When you finally start trusting that internal GPS instead of constantly looking outside, that must feel huge, given how much we rely on external validation.
It's described as a really deep, almost vulnerable surrender. It's that feeling of relief, of clarity when the cognitive chatter, the fear finally quiets down and you allow that inner wisdom to come through. She talks about it feeling like a deep physical exhale, like you finally stop fighting against what you already know deep down. And that surrender, she argues, is an act of courage, not weakness.
But how does she make this practical? Because intuition can sound a bit, well, mystical or vague.
Right, she keeps it very grounded. Her key action involves practicing what she calls micro-listens, especially in moments of chaos or decision-making, to build up this intuitive muscle. It means consciously paying attention to those tiny signals, a brief moment of hesitation before you agree to something, a sudden flash of certainty about a person, maybe that little knot of dread in your stomach.
Like small experiments.
Exactly. For instance, before you hit send on an important email, just pause. 3 seconds. Ask yourself, does this feel right? Or when you meet a potential collaborator, notice your immediate physical reaction. You're not judging it initially, just collecting data from your body's subconscious processing.
And the sheer volume of digital information we face now, like in 2025, must make this kind of practice incredibly difficult.
It really does. Our lives are saturated with information. So next tools here are essentially a kind of disciplined digital detox for the soul. She argues that by consciously limiting some of the external inputs, the algorithmic suggestions, the 24/7 news cycle, the endless comparison on social media, you create space for your brain's natural instinctual processing to actually surface again. It's about deliberately turning down the volume on all that external noise so you can actually hear your own signal.
So chapter 3 is about learning to tune out the world just enough to finally hear the one voice that truly knows your path forward, which is your own unedited truth.
It's about fixing the signal-to-noise ratio, making sure the internal signal wins out.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Chapter 4, Techniques for Self-Discovery, Unearthing Hidden Strengths, feels really empowering because it flips the usual self-improvement script. Instead of focusing on all our flaws and what we need to fix, Knecht wants us to put our energy into discovering the strengths we already have, the ones we often overlook. She offers us like a mirror and a map to see our inherent value.
Yeah, that shift in focus completely changes the energy of the whole process, doesn't it? It goes from feeling like a struggle to feeling like an excavation, like digging for treasure. The core change she highlights is that self-discovery isn't about finding some missing piece or digging for gold somewhere out there. It's about polishing the treasure you already hold. Your innate talents, your personality traits, your unique experiences, things often hidden under layers of self-criticism or limiting beliefs or maybe past failures.
And she talks about a really powerful emotional pivot connected to this.
She does. She speaks about this profound release. Sometimes it even manifests as tears of recognition or just this sudden wave of self-compassion when those old limiting stories you've told yourself start to dissolve and they get replaced by more empowering truths. It forces you to realize that sometimes your perceived weaknesses are actually just your unique strengths that have been maybe overused or misdirected or simply not valued by the outside world. Like perfectionism could be seen as a misapplied strength for attention to detail, right?
That makes sense, but how does she make this discovery process tangible? What's the practical tool here?
Her key action really centers on simple but very intentional rituals, specifically things like journaling prompts and structured reflection exercises that are designed to bring this untapped potential to the surface. She might ask you to write about a time you felt truly alive and in flow, or maybe describe a task that feels almost effortless to you but seems hard for others. The ritualistic aspect, especially using pen and paper, encourages a deeper, more committed internal engagement than just, say, quickly logging something in an app.
Yeah, I can see how this provides a necessary contrast to the current sort of therapy boom and the rise of all these self-exploration apps we see, especially in the U.S.
Absolutely. The U.S. self-care market is flooded with apps for mood tracking, quick guided meditations, instant fixes. And while those can be useful tools, Knecht really insists on keeping this discovery process a bit more raw and ritualistic. It requires sitting with some potentially uncomfortable truths, revisiting your personal history and the narratives you've built around it. That's a process that's hard to digitize or gamify effectively. It forces you to get your hands dirty, metaphorically speaking, with your past to find the real truth about your core strengths.
So chapter 4 is basically our permission slip to stop chasing external templates of who we should be, and instead start investing deeply in understanding and appreciating the unique, amazing person we already are, just by bringing those hidden strengths out into the light.
It builds that absolutely critical, unbreakable foundation of self-worth.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Okay, now we're shifting into section 3, the engine of action. And in chapter 5, Knecht tackles a word that, let's be honest, carries a lot of negative weight for people: self-discipline. She directly confronts that common idea of discipline being all about restriction and suffering, and she reframes it brilliantly as freedom's forge, not a cage.
That reframing is absolutely crucial, especially for anyone who's prone to high achievement but also burnout. The core shift she proposes is seeing discipline not as some kind of arbitrary punishment or rigid, joyless existence. Instead, it's the bridge that takes you from just passively wanting something to taking unstoppable action. It's the mechanism where small, tiny, but totally non-negotiable commitments link together like a chain to create these huge transformations that procrastination or self-doubt used to block.
Yeah, that image of the unbreakable chain really helps visualize how those small steps build up to massive results, and the emotional payoff she describes is what makes it feel less like a chore.
Exactly right. The emotional pivot she identifies is that quiet internal surge of pride, real pride you feel after you actually complete one of those small commitments. She calls them micro wins, especially if it's something you've been putting off for ages. That tiny act of follow-through immediately starts to chip away at that deep-seated, often paralyzing self-doubt and replaces it with a stable, quiet confidence. You literally prove to yourself on a small scale that you are someone who does what they say they'll do.
So what's the practical way to do this without falling into that perfectionism trap, where if you miss one day, you give up entirely?
Her key action is laser focused on those micro wins. These have to be extremely tiny, almost ridiculously manageable commitments, like doing just 5 minutes of focused work on a big project, or sending that one difficult email you've been avoiding, or even just making your bed every single morning without fail. The whole point is to guarantee success, to build momentum through consistency, not through the sheer size of the task. It rewires your habits without overwhelming your system.
This approach feels particularly relevant, maybe even essential, given the way many of us work now in the U.S.
It's practically indispensable in this era of hybrid and fully remote work. When the traditional boundaries between home and office just dissolve, your personal resolve gets tested constantly.
Definitely.
When your structure has to be entirely internal, you desperately need a way to generate your own momentum. Next, micro-win strategy builds that necessary internal resilience and stability, but it does it without demanding the kind of rigid perfectionism, that all-or-nothing mindset that almost always leads to burnout and self-sabotage. It's about building sustainable internal accountability in a world that doesn't always provide external structure.
So discipline, in this view, isn't about being tougher on yourself in a harsh way. It's about making smaller, absolutely non-negotiable promises to yourself that consistently build internal trust and ultimately lead to more freedom.
Freedom is earned, incrementally, through committed, consistent action.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Chapter 6 feels like a real raw gut check moment in the book. It's titled, Embracing Hard Work When Talent Falls Short. Here, Nick really goes after that pervasive myth of effortless genius, the idea that some people are just naturally brilliant and don't have to try. Instead, she celebrates the necessary intentional effort that's required to sculpt real mastery.
Yeah, this is Knecht basically reminding us that all the vision and intuition in the world, which are vital, as we've discussed, are completely useless if you don't have the engine of effort to actually bring them to life. The core shift she's pushing for here is understanding that hard work isn't just about grinding away mindlessly or being busy. It's the alchemist. It's what turns raw, deliberate effort into actual excellence. It requires focus, consistent application, self-correction, sustained presence, not just showing up now and then when you feel inspired.
The emotional pivot she describes here feels, well, humbling, but also really liberating in a way. It's that genuine admission deep down that raw talent, that innate gift you might have, is simply not enough on its own to achieve mastery.
Right.
Talent might crack the door open, but it needs grit, persistence, and focused effort to actually walk through and build something meaningful. And making that admission, really accepting it, can spark this fierce, sustainable commitment to growth, instead of just waiting around paralyzed for inspiration to strike or coasting on past successes.
And her key action follows directly from that. It's the purposeful, conscious pairing of whatever talent you have with relentless persistence. She really emphasizes that persistence, focused effort, and crucially, learning from your failures and setbacks. Those are the only things that allow you to consistently outperform people who might rely solely on their natural gifts or get hailed as an overnight success. True mastery always requires that sustained application of intelligent effort over time, especially when you hit those inevitable plateaus.
And you see this principle validated constantly in the hyper-competitive professional world here in the U.S., don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Just think about all the stories that come out of the U.S. tech startup scene, for example, or even fiercely competitive creative fields like the gig economy.
Yeah.
The really inspiring viral success stories often feature the underdogs, right? People who maybe didn't have the fancy Ivy League degree or the family connections or the huge chunk of initial seed funding, but their sheer focused hustle, their capacity for sustained grinding effort, and maybe that hidden depth or unique perspective they bring that often ends up trumping the pedigree alone. Hard work, especially when it's aligned with a clear vision, becomes this ultimate competitive advantage that you simply can't buy or inherit.
So, Chapter 6 is that essential reminder. Talent might get you invited to the game, but it's persistence and grit, that willingness to do the hard work, that actually allows you to build the entire house of your success, brick by painstaking brick.
Show up, do the reps, especially the difficult ones. That's the core message.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. All right, let's shift into Section 4. This part focuses on navigating the external world while also fortifying our inner strength. Chapter 7 is called Cultivating Resilience, Rising from the Ashes. And Knecht does something really powerful here. She reframes resilience. It's not some fixed trait you're born with or not. It's like a muscle, phoenix muscle she calls it, that you have to actively train and strengthen, specifically through experiencing failure and setbacks.
That metaphor is fantastic because it immediately demystifies resilience, makes it feel attainable. The core shift she presents is all about completely reframing how we view setbacks. They aren't dead ends. They're not proof that you're incapable. They are, in fact, crucial setups for a stronger comeback. When you bounce back, the goal isn't just to get back to where you were, intact. It's to return fundamentally evolved, smarter, tougher, armed with critical data you could only have gotten from that mistake.
That reframing is everything, isn't it? That's what fuels the emotional pivot she describes.
Yeah.
That critical shift from the initial pit of despair or self-pity.
Right, the woe is me phase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Moving from that to this feeling of defiant, forward-looking hope. And that shift happens entirely because you consciously choose to reframe the failure, not as a judgment, but as essential fuel for your next attempt. It transforms the pain into a pure learning opportunity.
And to help accelerate that pivot, she gives a very practical key action. Actively reframe the pain as your teacher. Ask, what is this trying to teach me? And crucially, she advises using supple anchoring techniques, things like focused, deliberate breath work to regulate your nervous system when you're in the midst of that emotional storm. The point isn't to suppress the feeling of failure or disappointment, but to process the intense emotion quickly enough so you can extract the objective lesson before shame or panic completely takes over and paralyzes you.
Given the constant fluctuations we see in the economy, the job market, this kind of bounce-back ability feels less like a nice-to-have skill and more like a core survival mechanism these days.
It absolutely is a core necessity for any professional navigating, say, 2025 and beyond. Think about the ongoing economic ripples, the rapid shifts within industries, the inevitable corporate restructurings and layoffs we see constantly in the U.S. Cultivating this bounce-back artistry, as she calls it, is fundamental for long-term career stability. Your ability to recover quickly and learn from a project bombing or a product launch failing, or even losing your job unexpectedly, that capacity is often way more valuable now than your initial ability to succeed when everything's going perfectly. Resilience is probably the most essential portable skill you can possess.
So Chapter 7 teaches us to see failure not as like the final verdict condemning us forever, but more like a really demanding coach who's just there to make us fundamentally stronger and smarter for the next challenge.
Learn the lesson, embode in the pain, integrate that new data, and get back into motion immediately. Don't wallow.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates.
Chapter 8. Shaping Your Self-Image, Crafting the Inner Hero, dives deep into those internal stories we tell ourselves, often without even realizing it. This is all about the mechanism for consciously shifting that habitual inner narrative away from being our own worst critic and towards becoming the authentic champion we actually need ourselves to be.
This chapter feels really foundational because that deep-seated internal story you hold about yourself, it dictates pretty much everything, every behavior, every risk you're willing to take, every opportunity you even allow yourself to see or believe is possible for you. The core change Knecht identifies is the realization that your self-view isn't some fixed objective truth about who you are. It's actually a changeable lens, an adjustable filter that profoundly shapes every outcome and every possibility you pursue or even notice in the first place. If you genuinely believe deep down that you are worthy and capable of success, you will instinctively act in ways and pursue opportunities that align with that core belief. And the emotional pivot connected to changing that lens sounds incredibly powerful, almost like breaking free.
It is. It's that feeling of liberating release when that old, heavy shame starts to shed, that persistent, I'm not good enough voice or the I'm just faking it, I'm an imposter narrative. When that starts to dissolve, it unveils a bolder, more authentic version of yourself, finally free from those self-imposed limitations and old labels. It's really about shedding an identity that was built on fear and actively claiming an identity rooted in your potential.
But how does she make sure this isn't just wishful thinking? Like, how do we bridge the gap between just wanting a new self-image and actually internalizing it? We can't just magically wish ourselves into feeling successful.
And Knecht is very clear on this. It's not about delusion or toxic positivity. Her key action here involves the consistent daily practice of affirmations and rituals, but, and this is crucial, they must be rooted in actual evidence. Evidence you cultivate from polishing your real strengths, like we talked about in Chapter 4, and from consistently achieving those micro wins we discussed in Chapter 5. These daily rituals become the ongoing tools you use to actively rebuild that foundation of self-worth from the ground up, making the new, more empowering self-image start to feel genuinely true and eventually inevitable.
This focus on authentic internal truth feels like such a necessary counterpoint to the fatigue many people feel around the curated perfection we see everywhere in U.S. culture, especially driven by social media.
It feels like a direct response to exactly that fatigue. We see millions of people just exhausted by the constant pressure to maintain the perfect filter, the performative perfection required online. Knecht is essentially urging us towards an authentic internal glow-up, rather than just the superficial performative one for external validation. It's about crafting a self-image that is genuinely strong, resilient, and true on the inside, creating that core hero identity, not just one that looks good temporarily for a selfie or a polished LinkedIn profile. The inner hero has to be real, not just a carefully constructed facade.
So Chapter 8 is this powerful reminder that maybe the most important relationship we have, the one that underpins all external success, is the relationship with our own internal narrative. We are, in effect, the architects and the authors of our own future success stories, starting from the inside.
You get to write the script. Make it a challenging one, sure, but ultimately make it heroic.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Okay, moving into Section 5 now. Next shifts focus a bit here to how we navigate the external world, specifically through our relationships. Chapter 9 is titled Harnessing Emotional Intelligence, the Heart of Leadership. She really makes the case for how emotional intelligence, EQ, transforms us from being just reactive, knee-jerk responders into having more responsive wisdom, and how that leads to much deeper, more effective connections with other people.
Yeah, this is a really crucial pivot point in the book because, as she implies, truly meaningful, sustainable success is almost never achieved in total isolation. The core shift here is getting us to recognize that EQ is absolutely not a soft skill or something secondary. She argues it's the steel thread that weaves through all lasting success, whether you're leading a huge global organization or just navigating your personal life effectively. It's about mastering self-awareness, first and foremost, and then developing a sophisticated understanding of what motivates and drives other people.
And the practical result of having higher EQ is often that powerful emotional pivot we can experience in difficult interactions, right?
Exactly. It's that feeling, sometimes it feels like warmth, sometimes just relief that comes with genuine empathy. When you can accurately sense and understand why someone else is behaving or reacting in a certain way, even if you don't agree with it, the dynamic changes. Conflict stops being a battle to be won and transforms into more of a collaborative investigation to understand the different perspectives and find a way forward. Empathy literally unlocks doors that were previously bolted shut by misunderstanding or friction.
Knecht provides a really practical tool for this, for immediate de-escalation in those heated moments. Can you explain the pause and name technique she suggests?
Sure. The pause and name technique is beautifully simple but incredibly effective. It's designed to diffuse those internal emotional triggers before they explode into external actions or words you'll later regret. So when you feel an intense emotion bubbling up, maybe it's anger, frustration, defensiveness, the key action is to literally force yourself to pause, just for 3 to 5 seconds. And in that pause, you consciously name the specific emotion you're feeling, even just silently to yourself. Okay, I'm feeling frustrated right now, or wow, I'm feeling really defensive.
Just identifying it creates space.
Exactly. That simple act of naming creates a critical gap between the stimulus, what triggered you, and your response. It short circuits the immediate, often negative, reactivity and allows you to shift into a more observational mode. You can then use that insight, okay, why am I feeling defensive, to craft a more strategic, thoughtful response rather than just reacting purely on emotion.
This particular skill, especially in today's often complex and virtual work environments, seems like it's become absolutely non-negotiable for anyone in a leadership role, or really anyone working in a team here in the U.S.
Oh, it's vital in the hybrid or remote workplace of 2025. Think about it. When so much communication happens virtually, you lose a lot of the nonverbal cues, body language, tone of voice subtleties that help us read situations accurately. This massively increases the risk of misinterpretation and conflict. Effectively navigating team dynamics across different locations, maybe different time zones, relying heavily on email or Slack, it demands exceptionally high emotional intelligence. EQ is arguably the core differentiator now for effective leadership, genuine collaboration, and maintaining that crucial psychological safety within distributed teams.
So Chapter 9 really teaches us that emotional fluency mastering skills like pause and name isn't just nice, it's the primary language of true influence. Influence over ourselves first, and then influence within our teams and relationships.
It's the language that builds trust. And trust is the bedrock of any successful collaboration or relationship.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Chapter 10, Building Authentic Connections, the Web of True Support, delves into how genuine vulnerability and creating truly authentic bonds can build a network of support that actually bolsters our success, rather than just being a distraction or, worse, purely transactional networking.
This chapter feels like a direct response to the kind of isolation that can paradoxically increase as people become more externally successful. You know, that feeling of having to maintain an image of perfect competence or invincibility.
Right. Can't show weakness.
Exactly. The core shift, Knecht advocates here, is the realization that isolation isn't strength. It actively breeds stagnation and makes you brittle. In sharp contrast, she argues that real, vulnerable, mutually supportive connections actually amplify your highest potential. They provide essential accountability, crucial emotional support during tough times, and maybe, most importantly, diverse perspectives that you desperately need but can't get when you're stuck inside your own echo chamber.
So what's the emotional process that allows us to actually lower those guards and build those kinds of connections?
It's that conscious movement away from building defensive walls and towards cultivating more open-hearted alliances. That's the point where the healing process for loneliness really begins, she suggests. It takes real courage to recognize and then communicate that shared vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness at all. In fact, it's a profound relationship strength because it's what fosters deep, genuine trust.
But Knecht isn't saying just open up to everyone indiscriminately, right? She emphasizes being strategic about who you let in.
Absolutely not indiscriminate. Her key action here is all about rigorous curation and filtering of your inner circle. She strongly advises consciously seeking out givers, people who are generally positive, supportive, and ideally also aligned with your own growth trajectory. And just as importantly, she says you need to actively avoid or minimize contact with what she calls drainers.
The drainers.
Yeah, those individuals who consistently sap your energy. Maybe they lack ambition themselves and resent yours, or they just drag you down with constant negativity or gossip. She stresses that building a supportive network requires intentional effort. Focus on the quality and depth of connections, and ensure they are based on mutual growth and support, rather than just accumulating a large quantity of superficial contacts.
And this framework seems to speak so directly to the widespread issue of loneliness that we're seeing discussed so much in the U.S. right now.
It connects immediately and powerfully. The current U.S. loneliness epidemic, which research shows can often worsen even as career success increases, is a huge societal challenge. Knecht's approach offers a potent antidote by shifting the focus dramatically away from traditional, often superficial, transactional networking. You know, the kind that's purely about what can this person do for my career right now?
Right.
Instead, she emphasizes cultivating these soul-aligned circles, connections that are fundamentally supportive, emotionally nurturing, and serve as the critical social infrastructure that sustains not just your career, but your long-term mental health and overall well-being.
So Chapter 10 really drives home the point that success isn't a solo endeavor. It's truly a team sport, but the team needs to be built on radical trust and emotional authenticity, not just polite professional exchanges.
Choose your support web very carefully. It profoundly influences how high you can ultimately climb.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. And so we arrive at the final chapter, the culmination of Knecht's entire framework. Chapter 11, Integrating the Pillars Living the Extraordinary Life. This chapter feels like the ultimate challenge, doesn't it? It demands that we move beyond just understanding these concepts and actually embody this entire mindset, weaving together everything we've discussed from the initial self-audit and finding our vision through discipline and resilience, all the way to emotional intelligence and authentic connection.
Exactly. This is where the whole structure, meticulously built across the previous 10 chapters, finally becomes fully operationalized. It becomes a cohesive whole. The core shift here, the ultimate realization she wants us to reach, is that success isn't some final destination you arrive at or one big project you complete. It is the continuous daily integration of all those pillars we've explored.
So integrating the vision, the intuition.
Right, the clear vision, the quiet guidance of intuition, the steady power of consistent discipline, the bounce-back strength of resilience, the wisdom of emotional intelligence, the support of authentic connections, all of it working together every day. And her definition of extraordinary is key too. It's not some rare mythical status reserved for a select few. It's simply a choice you make and then execute on every single day through these committed, ritualized practices.
The emotional pivot associated with reaching this stage of integration. That must feel incredibly powerful, like finally having all the pieces click into place.
She describes it as deeply triumphant. It's that feeling of unshakable wholeness, of being centered and grounded and internally stable, almost regardless of what external chaos the market or life or anything else might throw at you. It's that state of inner command she mentioned at the beginning. You've achieved a kind of internal coherence.
So how does she ensure this doesn't just end up being another inspiring self-help book that sits on the shelf and we forget about by next month? How do we make it stick?
That's the critical point of this final chapter. The key action for this integration stage is committing to it for the long haul. Knecht absolutely insists on ritualizing these 10 pillars, embedding them into a sustainable, lifelong rhythm. She explicitly warns us against treating this framework like some temporary fix or a checklist you just work through once and then abandon. These integrated practices have to become your new default setting, your permanent operating system for navigating life.
And this kind of integrated mindset, this continuous rhythm of practice, that really does feel like the ultimate toolkit for navigating the kind of uncertainty we're likely to face in the coming years, the next decade.
Without a doubt. If you link this integration piece back to that forward look towards 2025 and beyond the accelerating pace of technological disruption, ongoing economic shifts, environmental challenges, having an integrated mindset that relies fundamentally on inner command is probably the only truly reliable tool for thriving amidst constant external change. When your internal pillars, your vision, your resilience, your discipline are strong and actively maintained day in and day out, then external shifts can't easily topple you. They just require you to lean into your established internal system to adapt and respond effectively.
So Chapter 11 is really the ultimate call to action, to move past just intellectually understanding these ideas and step into this sustainable daily living of this potentially revolutionary mindset.
Embodiment. That's the only final step that truly matters in the end.
If you found that interesting, please like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive through Paola Knecht's The Success Mindset, it really has been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've traced the path from defining success purely by external yardsticks, what society or our parents or the media tells us we should want, all the way to cultivating this inner-sourced fulfillment, a fulfillment that's built solidly on the clarity of your personal vision, guided by that unwavering intuition, and made real through the steady power of self-discipline.
Absolutely. And the powerful synthesis, the big picture that emerges, is that we genuinely have the authority and maybe the responsibility to define success entirely on our own terms, to consciously align what we achieve externally with what brings us internal joy and feels right, feels aligned with our integrity. The core truth that keeps coming back is simple but profound. The very moment you stop living someone else's definition of success is the moment you actually start succeeding authentically, guided by your own unique magnetic inner compass.
Which brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, as you start thinking about how to integrate these pillars into the actual rhythm of your daily life. We've talked a lot about how Knecht insists on ritualizing this mindset, making it a lifelong practice. So here's the question to really sit with today, right
Okay.
now. If your current daily ritual, meaning the sum total of your micro wins, the dominant tone of your self-talk, your typical level of resilience when things go wrong, and the focus you bring to your vision, if that current daily pattern was the permanent, unchanging definition of your lifelong success, would you fundamentally change it starting today? Use your honest answer to that question as a lens, a really clear lens to review your daily actions, your choices, and how actively you're pursuing that vision you've hopefully started to clarify.
That is a challenging but incredibly necessary question for realignment. Thank you so much for walking us through all these foundational shifts from the book. And thank you especially to you, our listener, for taking this deep dive with us today. We truly hope this encourages you to revisit your own definition of success and maybe start actively writing a new, more authentic, more fulfilling story for yourself. Until next time.